Imagine your ideal self. How would you look? What would you wear? What name might you have? Who are your friends? How do you see yourself showing up with other people? The mannerisms that you may display. Who do you most enjoy spending your time with? What roles do you fulfill in your family and your friend groups at work? In an intimate relationship? What hairstyle do you have? What is your career path? What are your hobbies? Now ask yourself, how closely does this match with how you currently express yourself and show up in the world? We're thinking of the ideal and the current. How do these match and how do these kind of come in conflict with one another? You may have noticed I didn't explicitly ask questions related to being trans or non-binary, at least not at this point yet. And this is because reflecting on exploring and questioning aspects of our gender is something that anyone can do, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of whether you're trans, non-binary, or cisgender. This allows us to not only have a better understanding of why we show up in the ways that we do and why we feel the things that we do, but it also allows us to identify when there might be changes for ourselves that are necessary, and it can also help us empathize with others that may be similar or very different from us in terms of gender. Our ideal self may not be perfectly possible in every way, but this version of ourselves that we envision also does not have to be 100% pure fantasy. For most people, the ideal self will be the same gender as how they have always shown up in the world. In other words, most people have gender identities that align with what has been expected of them based on their sex assigned at birth. Also known as being cisgender. For example, somebody who is, assigned male at birth, identifies as a boy, grows up, identifies as a man, and this fits for them. End of story. But there are also many of us, millions in fact, that envision a life where the gender of this idealized self does not align with the gender that's been expected of them. For me, I was assigned male at birth and therefore expected to identify as a boy, identify as a man, and then conform to those various gender roles and presentations and expectations that come with being seen as a man or a masculine presenting person. But I knew, even from a young age, that something just didn't quite fit. Even if I didn't have the answers or really know what was going on. But, I was able to gradually piece together that, I had this yearning desire to live my life as a woman. And it didn't seem possible for many years. And, I kind of avoided exploring it out of fear in many ways. I knew this expectation of living as a man did not align with my internal gender identity, that of being a woman. It is, of course, important to acknowledge that my experience is but one of many. Kind of this process of figuring these pieces out, again, as I've said, is going to look different for different people. Many people who are cis and trans identify as men or women, but there are also many people for whom neither of these identities really fit in terms of how they think about, feel, and express their gender. For those of us that don't hold gender identities that neatly align with what has been expected of us based on being born a certain sex, we have been told that questioning our gender, questioning whether or not we might be trans or non-binary, invalidates the possibility of being trans or non-binary. But you might be like, what is that? That doesn't make sense. Because there's kind of this idea of why are you questioning this if it's true? But how can we know we're trans or non-binary if we don't have the opportunity to first explore and question it? It's kind of like this catch-22 that we're not going to be valid no matter what to certain people. Probably sounds familiar to some of the experiences many of you have had. And, part of what I wanted to create this video for is really normalizing that process of questioning your gender. Pre-transition, early transition, even later into transition. Our gender is an evolving process. Our gender might, evolve as we understand ourselves better over time. And questioning is just a normal part. It's a healthy part. It helps us understand ourselves on a deeper level, which allows us to be happier and show up more authentically in our lives. I think all of that sounds good to me, but apparently not to everyone. There's this idea that we need to immediately be 100% certain, or else our identities aren't valid. And that's frankly complete fucking utter horseshit. It can lead to this sort of imposter syndrome, or a transgender imposter syndrome that I've spoken about in past videos. But let's take a step back. Even taking a step back from being trans, from exploring gender, and all of that stuff that comes with that, how often are we 100% certain about anything in our lives, especially when it comes to things like big life transitions? How often have we had internal dilemmas or made pros and cons lists or something like that to help us figure out what sort of decisions to make? We do this all the time. Like, there are, daily decisions that sometimes we're not 100% certain about. I may wake up and be like, I don't know what I want for breakfast. Oh, you must not like breakfast if you're not 100% certain. Oh, what? That's fucking stupid. Of course, there's going to be dilemma for things that are even more complicated than just figuring out a meal for the day. Questioning aspects of ourselves, the world, how we fit into the world, the actions that we take. It's not only helpful, but it's a normal part of just being human. Us humans, we often hate uncertainty and hate the unknown. And questioning is one of those ways that we can get closer to better understanding ourselves and our world and just every little thing in it, or some of the things in it. But there's that unfair expectation of being 100% certain off the bat when it comes to things like gender. It's related to that fear of the unknown in many ways, among other things. Of course, it isn't fair for someone to immediately be 100% certain about their gender right away at the very start of exploring it, because then what is the point of the exploration process? We gotta figure out things as we go. It's been going around in our head for, months, years likely, but now we're just starting to enact some of those things out in the world and how we express ourselves. And yeah, there's going to be new questions that come up because there's new experiences that are coming up. So, we're not going to be 100% certain, and that's again normal and okay. And this unfair expectation, it's certainly, among other things, rooted in hypocrisy, bias, misunderstandings or complete lack of understanding, difficulties with empathy, how bodies and identities are often politicized unfairly, and so much more. Cisgender people are often able to take gender for granted, and this also factors into this piece. What they know in terms of their gender identity aligns with what they have always been told. So in many ways, the vast majority of cis people don't have to go through that exploration process. So it can be hard for some people to empathize with other people who do need to go through that exploration process. Trans and non-binary people are forced in many ways to figure out gender because there's a discrepancy with how we feel internally and how we're expected to identify, present, or just simply exist in this world. When we're confronted with a society that's not created for us, like in the case of trans and non-binary people, questioning not only makes sense, but it's necessary in order to figure out how the pieces fit together. Because we have these pieces of a puzzle, but they don't fit together into the puzzle that other people are telling us to construct. Or in other words, we're trying to be forced into a box that doesn't fit who we are. How can we explore and figure out these pieces without asking ourselves questions? It's not as simple as like, I think I'm trans. All right. End of transition. It's more often something like, I think I'm trans, or am I trans? And then going down this rabbit hole of figuring out where these thoughts and feelings are coming from, and getting answers and then more questions and answers and more questions and answers and more questions, and figuring it out as you go. And sometimes where we end up, a lot of times where we end up is not where we expected to end up when we're at the beginning. And that's okay, because our knowledge and understanding is ever evolving over time. All of this is to say, questioning many things in life, including gender, is normal and human. Questioning your gender, questioning whether or not you may be trans or non-binary, does not invalidate your gender. In fact, I would argue that questioning your gender shows that this is important to you. shows that you're putting time and energy into something that matters to you. Questioning can actually be validating because, it's a reminder of like, I'm exploring this because I'm interested, because it's important, because I want to figure it out. If gender didn't matter to us, why would we explore it? It's a process. It'll take some time again to really reflect on like how you identify, what you value in terms of gender identity, gender expression. And then, take some time to figure out like, is gender transition something that you want or need to do? And then figuring out from there, like the rest of your gender transition roadmap, so to speak, based on your unique goals and needs. I encourage curiosity and self compassion and not being afraid to find resources and support along the way. And on that note, I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions down in the comments below. What here resonated with your current or past experiences? Can you relate to this process of questioning and uncertainty? How do you envision your ideal self with respect to gender? And has this informed your gender exploration and or gender transition in any way? For those of you further along in your journeys, what sort of advice or encouragement would you offer to people who are earlier in that exploration and questioning phase, whether pre-transition or early in transition? Let me know all of this and more down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons. Tipsy and I love and appreciate you all so very much. Bye for now.